talk about something today that seems, it might seem like it's a little tricky at first, but it's actually, we're going to break it down. We're going to make it really pretty easy, okay? And you're like, yeah, right, define easy, but let's see what we can do here. We're going to talk about DNA and RNA, okay? DNA and RNA. Now, remember that DNA, when we say DNA, that contains your genetic code. Wow, that's pretty big, okay? That's your genetic code. And RNA, okay, and RNA reads the genetic code. So this is kind of a big, important area. These are not only located, the DNA and the RNA is not only located in the cells, which is in every cell of our body, okay? The cool thing about DNA is we can identify DNA because it's like a fingerprint, okay? Our DNA is so unique to us that nobody else has the same DNA. So, boy, this has been a big deal for forensic science, hasn't it? So, if I find anything in my body that has DNA, which means any part of the living part of me that has a cell, okay, then I can go in and look at the DNA and I can match it up and I can look at these genetic codes that we're going to talk about and I can identify whose DNA it is. Wow, that's amazing, okay. So what does that mean? That means that the genetic code is the same in every cell. Wow, you mean trillions of cells have my DNA, have my genetic code? Wow, once again, I say this every once in a while, but man, I mean, that just didn't happen by random. I mean, there's definitely a master designer, definitely a creator to the human body. It's incredible. So I will tell you this though, my mom, who's 88 right now, she taught nursing years ago, and she taught a lot of science and a lot of human anatomy, and they didn't understand DNA at all. As a matter of fact, she got a hold of, I teach a lot of science classes. I teach the biology and chemistry and human anatomy. She got a hold of a human anatomy book, and it was talking about all this stuff with DNA and RNA that we're going to talk about here. And she was like, "Wow, when did we learn all this stuff?" And I'm kind of like, "Wow, we're learning this now in the early college classes." And she's like, "Wow, I just didn't even know." Isn't that something? We take things for granted. We've learned so much. Of course, my mom is 88, so that's been a couple generations of scientists and people learning stuff. So it's incredible what we're going to give you today wasn't around years ago, okay? But now we know it, and we know it pretty well. So once again, DNA contains a genetic code. RNA reads the genetic code. It's in every cell. So I started to tell you the forensic part. So if I find hair, okay, is hair living? You say, well, I don't know. Yeah, it was actually made. It was living at one time. It was in a hair follicle. So it contains the DNA. Fingernail, that has DNA. If I have an eyelash fall out, wow, that has DNA on it. If, our skin cells, okay, our skin cells, kind of interesting, they reproduce every 20 days. You're going to make a whole new set of skin cells, just a little at a time. So a skin cell falls off. Okay, if you find blood, you find skin, you find if somebody even is walking on the floor, okay, if somebody's even walking on the floor and it's kind of rough and they scratch off a couple of cells and don't even know they did it, you left the DNA fingerprint. So wow, think about the forensics and the fact that if they find any DNA, anything that was living, okay, still contains the DNA. So wow, that's the whole DNA thing. They pulled out lots of crime scene things, and they still have the DNA there. Somebody will have, they'll find a gun, there's a fingerprint on there. They can access the DNA, and they can go back to before we even knew about DNA and still find the killer or different things. Anyway, so really fascinating, really fascinating. So let's learn how that works. Well, DNA stands for, okay, DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. Okay, all right. So it's a great big word. Okay, it's a great big word. And that's why we abbreviate it DNA. Okay, but it stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. Now, if you just kind of break it down and you say it several times, deoxyribonucleic acid, deoxyribonucleic acid. Pretty soon you're kind of hearing certain things. Okay, deoxy, and then you hear ribo. Okay, nucleic acid. Now it's kind of interesting because we're going to talk about the nucleic acids, okay, and the ribo that we're talking about is actually the production of the ribosomes that come down that endoplasmic reticulum that makes a new cell, okay. So we're talking about deoxy, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit, but we have the D in that stands for deoxy, and then we have ribonucleic acid. Okay, so we abbreviate that. So isn't that nice that we abbreviate that DNA? And it sounds really impressive to know it, but it's not all that hard anymore. And when we first came up with this, people were like, oh my gosh, nobody knows what DNA stands for. Well, now we're teaching this deoxyribonucleic acid. Deoxyribonucleic acid. Now, RNA, okay, RNA is just the second part of that, okay. So RNA, all right, when we talk about RNA, it stands for ribonucleic acid. Okay, so DNA is the deoxy. Okay, now once again, D in the Latin root here. Okay, in the Latin root means points to something. Okay, like in the word depart, we part in a different direction. Okay, it points to. It's kind of interesting. So oxy is for oxygen. Wow, isn't this interesting? Points to the oxygen, okay, in the ribosomes of the nucleic acid. Now, once again, it's not a Latin class. I certainly don't want to confuse you. And when I talk about these different things in Latin, it's not so much that you need to know those; they're not critical. It just helps us to kind of be like, oh wow, I wish this would have been written in good old American English. We'd have called it, hey, look, it's the oxygen that comes from the ribosomes that produce the proteins, and look at those nucleic acids. Okay, I mean, it's a great way of saying it all put together, deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA, and then over here for RNA, it's just ribonucleic acid. So let's talk about what all that means, okay? So what we found is, that we have this, we found that we have this incredible structure, okay? We have this incredible structure. And we can start out make it look like a ladder here, okay? So what we have here is we have a combination, and we'll get into more of this. If you were to take human anatomy, then we would break this down, or even chemistry, we'd break this down into the sugars and the proteins and all the different chemicals here, okay? So what we actually have is we have a long string of something called nucleic acids, okay? So these nucleic acids are connected, okay? These nucleic acids are connected to little rungs on this ladder that's actually made up of sugars in our body. Isn't that amazing? Okay, sugars and proteins. So what are nucleic acids? Because this is pretty important. Deoxyribonucleic acid. Well, a nucleic acid, okay, a nucleic acid is an actual compound, an actual compound that exists that carries genetic information. So once again, that sounds complicated, but let me show you what we're talking about here. Okay, so there are 4 nucleic acids. Okay, so these are nucleic acids. Now remember that I was telling you early that what America does is America kind of takes things and simplifies them, okay? These are nucleic acids. They're also known as nucleotides, okay? So if somebody says nucleotides, nucleic acids, don't be confused. That's the same thing, okay? So there's only 4. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to show you a human genome later that you'll be like, oh wow, I'm beginning to see the picture. So the 4 nucleic acids are adenine. Okay, now once again, we put it through the American sound and American spelling. The original Latin word was adenosine. Okay, and once again, we see an interesting deal because we kind of look and we go, was the original Latin word with a C or with an S? And it's kind of interesting because either spelling is accepted, but a lot of times you see this with a C, adenosine or S-I-N-E or C-N-E. So you can see the Americanized probably is the S. So we call it adenine, okay? But you could call it adenosine. It's the same thing. We just took this word and shortened it up, just like we took liter, which used to be litre, and made it liter. Okay. So here's the four nucleic acids in DNA: adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. Okay. All right. G-U-A-N-I-N-E. So what we do is we assign those a letter Okay, we assign them the first letter of the word. So adenine is an A. Okay, thymine is a T, cytosine is a C, and guanine is a G. Now there is I had a student one time tell me this, and sometimes these little things work, sometimes they don't. Ways to remember things, okay? But I had a student tell me, she said, oh, you know how I remember that? There's a restaurant, it's a big buffet where you go and eat lots of food, okay? And it's called Golden Corral, okay? I don't know if you've ever heard of Golden Corral or not, but she said, I really like to eat a lot of food where? At Golden Corral, A-T and C-G. Because the A and the T always go together, okay? The C and the G always go together. Now what does that mean? Well, that means on this ladder here, okay? So A always bonds with T, okay? And C always bonds with G. So if I have it, so let's get these lined up a little better, okay? So if I'm looking at the DNA, if this is a T, then I know this has to be a what? Has to be an A. They don't have to always be in that order. If that's a G, okay, Golden Corral, C and G always go together, then I know this has to be a C. Oh. So A and T and C and G. So it doesn't matter. So there's just tons of order. So you're like, wow, you mean to tell me that everybody's DNA is different? And I'm like, yeah, that's incredible because the DNA is so long. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So you help me a little bit here. Let's put a C here. What's this one going to be? Well, it's going to be a G because C and G always goes together. Now what happens is that ladder is easy to see. But DNA is in the shape of a double helix, which is like taking this ladder and twisting it. Okay? So DNA, the shape of DNA, okay, the shape of DNA is called a double helix. Double helix. Helix, Latin, twisted. Okay? So here we go. So here's the shape. So boom, 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 boom. We're going to take that ladder, we're going to twist it. Okay? To where each one of these turns has three, okay? Each one of these turns has 3 nucleic acids that match, okay? And every one of those three is called a codon. So each one of these is called a codon. Once again, Latin for code, okay? So let's just go through here and let's just say this one was a C, that one would be a G, and it's just random. There's so many of them that when we do these random things, we find that nobody has the same DNA. So C and G, we can do another G, C, maybe even a C, G, maybe this one's a T, maybe this one's an A, a C, a G, and we just go all the way down. So every time there's an A, there's a T, and every time there's a C, there's a G. And every time we have A and T together and C and G together. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop there. Okay, now remember that's a codon. Okay, remember DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, is in the shape of a double helix. It's not a straight ladder, it's twisted. Okay, so here's this. What's the shape? Double helix. 3 nucleic acids bound together. That's 3 nucleic acid pairs. That's codon. Remember DNA, adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine. Okay, so we'll pick the next video up with RNA.